Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by Caliber Mind. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm joined by Hana Jacover. Hana, welcome back. This is going to be another interesting one, and it's one I've heard a lot of people struggle with, so I'm excited to talk about it. And that's exactly how you have that conversation in the interview about why you left and maybe when you have it.
Yeah. And this is a tough one too, because there's so many different scenarios that could play into the reason why you left an organization. And I mean, my personal approach and opinion is that you should always be honest and authentic to yourself and your experience in whatever way that honors you. And so you have to first identify what that means to you. Is, what does it mean for me to be honest about this? What does it mean for me to be authentic about this experience? And to really be able to process that and have that documented for yourself, because it creates boundaries around the topic. Here's what I'm willing to say. Here's what I'm not willing to say. Here's what I'm willing to, divulge. Here's what I'm not. And it might be, I'm not willing to share much at all about this experience versus, you know what, I can open up a little bit about this and be honest and talk through what happened to me or how things went down, and being able to have a talk track around that. Prior to being able to doing that is something that you and I were talking about before we got on, is being able to process the experience in itself. Because, and I've had hundreds of these conversations through coaching, and the trauma that exists in the workplace it's not acknowledged at a level that we need to acknowledge it. And if that's the reason why you did leave, if there was some sort of toxic situation, some sort of something that led to you experiencing trauma in the workplace, you need to process that on your own. Because if you cannot process that, you won't be able to tell the story you want to tell. You will be telling the story that your brain is using to protect you, to keep you safe, so you don't get hurt again. And oftentimes that story is not one that actually serves us. Our brain thinks it's serving us. Our brain thinks it's protecting us because we're activated around that. But in reality, we know that we have tunnel vision and we're really hyper focused on it instead, in that one experience versus what it could look like, all the infinite possibilities of what it could look like in the future. So I think that really it becomes easy to tell your story once you've come to terms with your story. So I think even before, it's a prerequisite essentially to process whatever that experience was, find a way to honor that experience. And that could look like a lot of things. It could look like forgiveness for yourself. It could look like forgiveness of others. It could look like letting go. It could look like, some sort of release, but you have to process, you have to honor that experience. You have to release any negative emotions around that. And then you can start to tell a story that is actually impactful and actually helpful to you, and isn't wrapped up in emotion and triggers. And that way you're not just going to be projecting your negative experience.
I'm so glad you went there, because that's what I almost jumped in. Telling your truth, yes. Giving yourself time to know what that truth is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because I think as marketers, we understand better than anyone, the closer you are to something, the harder time you have describing it in a way other people get. And that could apply to a product, and it can apply to your work experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know this has been really hard for you, what are some strategies? Like, I've talked to mentors and gotten their advice, but what are some strategies maybe people can use that are similar to work through? Is this something I should say, or how does this strike you,
I think that in your preparation for your interviews, just start coming up with some scenarios and practice your answer out loud and just see how it feels. One thing we don't like to do is feel, but our emotions and how they show up in our body are huge indicators of the way that we should move about. And so say it out loud. If it doesn't feel good, then ask yourself why. If it feels okay, if it feels like, okay, I can feel strong and confident all the ways that I want to show up with this answer, then you can roll with it. But it's really about, okay, how does this statement feel? Does it align with who I want to be? Does it align with how I want to show up? And if that doesn't ring true in your body, then it's something to evaluate. It's something that, maybe you need to work on that a little bit more before you start talking about it, before you start sharing about that experience, because you aren't at the end of it and you aren't quite there yet. You've got to push through to the end before you can start articulating it in a way that puts the best version of yourself in the driver's seat during that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking through different scenarios, some of which may be harder for the individual who's going to walk into the interview than maybe warranted. I don't want to negate anybody's experience, but a ton of people have been laid off. And I don't think there's as much of the stigma right now around, well, they were trimming the fat in air quotes. This is the term that used to be used. So I think there's some scenarios that just aren't as a red flag to the person who's interviewing. But I think you're going to get more questions when you were only somewhere for a couple months, 5 months, 6 months. And then I've even run into a lot of questions when I've been somewhere less than 2 years, just barely.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this was years ago. So I think the standards changed a bit.
Definitely.
But it's always been interesting to have those conversations when a certain workplace had some pretty toxic traits that just didn't work with your personality. It is hard to frame that in a way that people can hear. But some advice I've gotten that I really loved was the wrong people won't hire you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the space to process everything, and let's say, just as an example, I've worked in a lot of companies, and this particular company, the cultural norm was to scream at each other in meeting rooms. That doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work for a lot of people, surprisingly.
Right. But if you have the context of, I was at a lot of different companies for a long period of time, and that one shows up because of this reason, some people may worry that you're touchy, I guess. Most won't. Most will be like, yeah, I wouldn't want to do that either.
Yeah, see, and like I find this conversation so interesting to me, because, and even in coaching, people will go on these huge journeys to craft a message and over explain, over justify, and I say, what if you just ask for what you want?
Mm-hmm.
And that direct ask, or that direct, like, here's what happened, can feel super intimidating to people. And I think that as a society, and like just through like social norms, and almost if we look at like the way that a neurotypical brain operates, when we are direct and we tell the truth, like we often are activated by that. And I will say, like, a lot of the neurotypical population is activated by that just because of social norms, just because of the way that we've been socialized. We have a tendency to think that like people are never always telling the truth. And it's fascinating to me. I think it's like a social phenomenon. So when you do show up and you tell the truth, it can feel scary. It can feel unsafe, so you really have to protect yourself. You have to make sure you're in the right environment. And to your point, if you show up and you tell the truth and somebody says, well, I don't like that. Well, do you really want to work with them anyways?
Not in my experience.
Yeah. Right. Like, is that then a safe environment for you to be in if you can't speak your truth at all in general, in the early beginnings of the relationship? So I think that that's something to think about is what would happen, or what could be the reaction if I just told the truth, or if I was really direct about the situation, even if you don't dive into the details, right? But you talk about this environment wasn't a safe place for me, and here are the reasons, or here's maybe what I do value. You can think forward momentum there. Here's what I am looking for that I didn't get in that situation. Here's what I value that I wasn't getting.
Yeah, yeah. And this applies to both proactively leaving and being asked to leave. But maybe we dig a little bit more into the scenario where you're fired. Um, and I have hired people who have been very honest and said, "Hey, I was let go, and it's because I don't like working remotely and I can't do it. I need to be around people and I just can't focus the way I can. So my priorities weren't aligned. I understand why they did it. And now I'm looking for a job where I can be in-house."
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you know that about yourself. You have a
Yeah.
great track record other than that one blip that happened during the pandemic. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I think that God, there's so many different situations that can go into that. And um, a lot of people, or in many situations, like, you can totally be pushed out of your role as well. And
Hmm.
I think that if you come at it from a learning experience and what the unmet need was, then it can be a beneficial conversation to have. I think that at the same time, if you were let go because you were not performing, because, like, that's something that then you do need to explore is, what was going on for you there, and what was your unmet need? Like, what was the deal? Like, what's up with that? That's literally one of my favorite questions to go, what's up with that?
Yeah, I love it.
So, like, just explore that, and again, focus on the lessons that you learned, the learning experience, and the forward looking. Here's what that experience taught me in terms of what I need.
Yeah. And it's a good opportunity to say, am I just really burned out and checked out? Do I need to explore something else? Is this not working
Mm-hmm.
for me anymore?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot that can go into that.
Yeah.
Whew, yeah. So what I'm hearing is if you can give yourself time to process, do. If you can't, maybe bounce it off of a lot of people that you trust.
Yes. And um everybody has time. Like,
Mm,
you're sitting down watching a show on Netflix, you've got 15, like, everybody has 10 minutes. If
mm,
you don't, you're lying to yourself. You are in full control of your time. What we often don't put a lot of thought into is our energy. So if
mhm.
you can flip, just ditch time for a second, if you can focus on your energy and say, do I need to put energy into this processing, or, like, where do I need to put energy right now? And then you can say, all right, I've got all this time, and now I'm going to direct my energy in a more effective way. So, am I going to direct my energy and sit and watch Netflix when I know that I need to process some trauma? No, because I know that dissociation in this moment is not going to help me.
Mhm.
So, it's really about looking at your energy and directing your energy in the best way that is going to be most efficient for you and the use of your time. So I kind of, like, think of I don't have time as this like, it's an interesting excuse to me, because we all are in control of our time, and you're in control of your energy as well. And while it might take some time to kind of, like, massage all of that in a way that it works for you, um, you can make it work. You do have to put energy into it, though.
That is an excellent point and very difficult for a culture that values shoving your feelings in a box. So
absolutely. Yes. Yes. It requires the untangling of a lot of social norms, a lot of beliefs that we have been taught, a lot of things around productivity that really are driven by the underpinnings of capitalism. And, we've just been operating in all of that for literally our entire lives. So it does require some dismantling of that, but it leads to some liberation and the ability to show up in the way that you want.
and I'm wondering if this is going to have something to do with our next topic, which is finding power in your own voice.
I love how that flows.
Yeah. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out calibermind.com.